Thanks everybody for joining. I think we're just going to wait another minute or so just for a few more people to join. Just going to give it another 30 seconds. It's the last few join us. So, hi everybody, a very warm welcome to all of you to this very exciting webinar, Making the Leap to Team Leader. So my name is David Fleming. I'm a partner at Itad, and I lead Itad's work on monitoring, evaluation and learning in the conflict, security and humanitarian space. And I've been looking forward to this webinar for quite some time now, and I'm delighted to present to you Isabel Vogel, Mayssa Daye, Sasha Jesperson and Tim Shorten, 4 exceptional team leaders that we've been very lucky to work with in ITAD over the years. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment, but just first of all, a few words on why we're here and why we've organised this. So in ITAD, we're a consulting firm and we specialise in strategy, evidence and learning on complex global challenges. And most of our work is delivered through projects. And all of our projects are led by team leaders, either internal staff or external freelance consultants. And over the years, we've noticed a few things. So first of all, we've noticed the team leader role is fundamental to successful delivery of a project. We've also noticed the role requires a superhumanly impossible mix of different skills. So the technical expertise, the kind of the deep subject matter knowledge, excellent verbal and written communication and listening skills, strong relationship building, team management skills, the ability to nurture a team and to get the best out of your team, and so on. And I think we often find that client terms of reference, they often reflect a huge shopping list of these kinds of skills and experience. And we often sort of talk about it sort of finding a needle in a haystack, sort of find the right team leader for any job. But at the same time, we find that our clients on our bids are scoring CVs against many of these criteria, but that's very hard to do on paper without interviewing somebody, meeting somebody, getting to know somebody. And so we often find ourselves getting to the bid stage and finding somebody who fits the bill, who we know and trust, who's got the availability, is extremely difficult. And so this has been a kind of a challenge for quite a long time. And what we've done in ITAD over the last couple of years is really been stepping up our investment in our team leaders and the professional development of our team leaders, and looking at how we can play a role in sort of trying to help those people that want to become a team leader, whether they're currently a deputy team leader or a technical expert, to help people make that leap to become a team leader. So this afternoon, we've got an opportunity to hear from 4 very experienced team leaders about their journey to becoming team leader, about the challenges they faced, and also some tips and advice for those of you that are wanting to make the leap yourselves. So without further ado, I'm just going to let our panelists introduce themselves just for a minute, starting with Isabel.
Oh, hi, everyone, and thank you, David. It's really good to be here and really exciting to have this opportunity to just reflect a bit on my journey and listen to other journeys to team leaders. So my current role is on 2 ITAD evaluations, one for the Global Centre for Biodiversity, Climate and Livelihoods with DEFRA, and one with the Wellcome Trust on their Climate Impact Awards. And I've just finished leading a 5-year evaluation with ITAD, the Global Challenges Research Fund. I've been working with ITAD for about 14 years, so probably all the time that I've been an independent consultant. And before that, my background was in organisational and programme management and team leader roles in a research and university setting, in a brief stint in government. So those roles have kind of quite implementation and program management oriented, and later on I moved into Mel roles before becoming an independent consultant. So yes, that was been my pathway to becoming a team leader. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Isabel. Mayssa?
Hi everyone, I'm Mayssa Daye. I'm an independent consultant and I've been working with Itad for around 7 to 8 years now. I'm the team leader for the Middle East and North Africa MEL contract for the ISF, which is the Integrated Security Fund for HMG for UK government, essentially. And I was a previous team leader on previous iterations of that contract, was sort of focused more narrowly previously on just the Middle East rather than North Africa as well. I come from a implementation background, so I started off working for UK government directly, also had a sort of short stint with the UN, and then moved into implementation in the governance and stabilization sectors. So my focus area was on conflict affected areas, mostly in the Middle East, but also in Pakistan and also in parts of Africa. It's great to be on the panel today, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mayssa. Sasha?
Thanks, David, and thank you all for joining us. It's great to see this many people come out for this. So I joined Itad in, I think it was towards the end of 2020, to be the team leader of the MEL contract that supported the Home Office Global Serious and Organised Crime portfolio, which came to an end at the end of last financial year. But I've still been doing other contracts with Itad. I came to be the team leader on that contract because of my background working on serious organised crime rather than MEL. So I think when David was introducing at the beginning that there's lots of different backgrounds that can feed into being a team leader, that's the way that I came into that, and I can talk a bit more about that later. So back to you, David.
Thanks, Sasha. And Tim?
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name is Tim Shorten. I'm an independent consultant as well, and I'm currently the team leader for the Fleming Fund evaluation, which is a UK Department of Health funded programme on antimicrobial resistance. I've been working with Itad probably for about a similar time to Isabel, about 13 years, and I've been team lead on a number of different kind of evaluations, including for FCDO, UNICEF, Welcome, UK, HSA, WHO. Before this, I kind of started my career in international development working with DFID, formerly DFID, now FCDO. And was there for about 10 years before moving on to a smaller M&E focused consultancy firm based in South Africa. But it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you to all our panelists. So before we get started, just a few words on how it's going to work. So we've got 45 minutes for discussion, and we split the discussion into 3 themes. So we're going to first of all talk about finding your identity as a team leader, and we'll hear from our panelists in terms of their experiences and their journey. Then secondly, we'll talk about strategic leadership, what this means in practice. And then thirdly, we'll talk about leading people through change and transition, particularly reflecting a lot of the changes and challenges we're facing right now in the sector. Then we'll have 25 minutes for Q&A. So if you have a question at any point during this session, could you please find the Q&A button, which is at the top, should be at the top of your bar, or it could be under the more on the 3 dots. If you post a question on the Q&A, my colleague Ray is going to be selecting a subset of those questions to put into and publish in the chat. And we will do our best to answer as many of those as we can in the 25 minutes or so that we've got at the end. So yeah, without further ado, I think we'll move on to the discussion. And I'm going to introduce our first topic. So this topic is around finding your leadership identity. I think, as you move into a team leader role, that often means shifting what you do, the work, from doing the work yourself to helping others deliver and others succeed. And that can be quite a tough journey at first, especially when you're building your own confidence and you're learning your way into team leadership. And I guess as along the way, it's important, you stay true to your own values but also you find a leadership style that works for you and your team and for Itad and the clients. And so the first question, I'm going to start with Sasha. Can you tell us a bit about your journey to becoming a team leader and what for you was the biggest mindset shift when you moved from a technical delivery role to a team leadership role?
Sure. So as I said in the introduction, I came into the team leader role from a background as a subject matter expert rather than a Mel expert. So that, I guess, was a bit of a challenge. I'd led teams within organizations, so universities and think tanks, and I'd TL'd some smaller deliverables that relied specifically on expertise, so research projects. So I brought a combination of team management and working with clients on specific projects. But this was the first, I guess, comprehensive MERL project that I had led. And so what is different? It's managing a team that's a mix of consultants, but also Itad staff. It's also managing a client and having multiple work streams on the go. For me, I think the biggest mindset shift was not having to fill all of the time with the doing and the delivery. So not stepping on the toes of the team, but also not feeling guilty at not doing the doing. So on the one hand, I think the biggest challenge for me was the research work strand, which was part of the contract that I was working on, because this had previously been my bread and butter. And I think I definitely stepped on some toes there by being perhaps too involved at the beginning of research, of wanting to get my hands dirty instead of stepping back and play more of that oversight role. But on the other hand, because I came into this as an organised crime person and not a Mel person, I was much more hands off with the Mel side. So for the people who were leading those work streams, I think they had much more freedom to get on with their work. And so seeing those two different work streams evolve, I think, was quite a learning experience of seeing that the Mel side was much more empowered to do their job themselves. So it was getting the right balance there. I think the key challenge is figuring out exactly what is the responsibility of a team leader. David, I think you said this really well at the beginning, that there is many moving parts to team leading a MERL contract. There's client engagement, there's team management, there's budget, there's ensuring that there's cohesion across work strands. And so there's keeping a hold on all of that and keeping all of those balls in the air. But I think the other challenge is a team members' perceptions of what is my responsibility as the team leader. And so negotiating a balance there. I think starting out, a big challenge was not necessarily a fear of what those expectations were, but trying to fit into what was expected from each of the different team members. And so I think finding an identity of this is what I see to be team leadership. And yeah, it's definitely a learning process.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm going to go next to Mayssa. How much of that, Mayssa, resonates with you?
Yeah, I mean, I was nodding along quite a lot there. I think I can relate to quite a few of your points, Sasha. So, I also came from a implementation background rather than a Mel background. So the mindset shift was, both going from a consultant to a team leader, but also going from being responsible for actually delivering the work and doing that to a very set and defined work plan where we're just delivering against that particular work plan for that particular project, and actually trying to shift to more strategic, more shorter term Mel interventions, but ones that are sort of focused on longer term client objectives. So that in itself was a kind of a mind shift for me. And I think, at the time, the best bit of advice that I got was from my husband, which was to use my resources and don't try to be a one-man show, because it's guaranteed to fail. And I think, I think that was actually quite a good bit of advice. My approach when I first sort of joined as the TL of the MENA Mel contract, which was, significantly larger than the other contracts that I had done. So it was on a sort of another scale in comparison to the previous TL positions I'd done, was to, work with our team that we had, give the technical ML experts the space to, you know, do what they do best, give them space to sort of shape their approaches and focus on their roles, whilst I took more of a sort of oversight role, if you like, focus on bringing it all together, making sure that it's meeting the client's needs, but also ITAD standards as well. So kind of taking that shift backwards. And I have to admit, there's definitely a bit of fear early on, you know, my confidence around being a TL when I first joined on the MENA-MEL contract, I wouldn't say was very high. You work with some really brilliant minds on some of these contracts, and on the current contract I'm on, you know, there's really excellent technical team members that have specific specialities, you know, whether they're an economist bringing a value for money expertise, or political access and influence, or GESI, you know, gender equality and social inclusion. They've got their specific specialities, and they're really, really good at that. Because I had to sort of constantly remind myself that that's not my role. It's not my role to play those specific technical areas. My role is to bring it all together. My role is to keep that kind of strategic oversight, and to also draw on my experiences from prior to MEL work, you know, my experiences of working directly for government or working as an implementing partner. So to use those skills, if you like, in addition to MEL skills.
Thanks, Mayssa, and thanks to both you and Sasha for being so honest and open about your first TL experience, and sharing, yeah, the fear factor for that first experience, and kind of what you learned from that. That's really, really helpful. I'm going to just bring in Tim and Isabel now. Maybe Tim, first of all, tell us about your first ever team leader role.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so it was an evaluation of Girl Hub, which was an interesting collaboration between the Nike Foundation and between FCDO. And yeah, that made a kind of an interesting, challenging context, in the sense that there was the whole idea was a private sector innovation meets kind of public sector delivery and kind of bureaucracy, and that bringing them together would create some magic. So I think that was quite, you know, the culture of evaluation isn't the same in every organisation, and so the expectations around what would be being brought were also different. So it was quite daunting going into that, which is quite high profile. And then also working with a team of, they're only a small team, but I was working with two colleagues who are much more experienced. I felt much more qualified than me to kind of work on these particular topics. And so I really had that kind of imposter syndrome that Mayssa and Sasha have both talked about. And I think, you know, it's just I guess getting stuck in, being a human being, being open, and being prepared to kind of admit and accept that you don't have all the answers, giving space to them to kind of be the experts in their particular areas and their fields, but trying to provide a framework within which that could happen. And also kind of just connecting and building trust amongst us by being, you know, understanding them as people, and you know, what's going on in their lives, as well as just expecting them to deliver. And so I think all of those things are really important in terms of trying to maximize and leverage the real kind of expertise that you have on the team. I'll stop there, David. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to bring Isabel now. Isabel, tell us about your pathway to becoming a team leader.
Yeah, so my first team leader role as a consultant was the building capacity to use research evidence, which was a then DFID program. Quite complicated kind of research design and what the client wanted, because it was really, you know, lots of intangible processes. It was kind of 6 countries. It was quite big and quite daunting. And I think, yeah, I was also struggling a lot with imposter syndrome. But I think what Tim just said about not needing to have all the answers really resonates with me, because I think, yeah, I felt that in my role, I kind of really needed to be on top of everything. And if people asked a question, I had to know everything. And that kind of going back to what Mayssa said, you know, started off sort of spreading way too thin and trying to be everything. And one woman show, and so just learning to take a step back and kind of really clarify. In my role was to clarify a kind of a vision for the contract, and I think that's another big mindset shift to, rather than you're delivering something technical within a framework, it's like, well, what do you kind of, what's the vision for the contract? What's the contribution you think potentially needs to be made here? What does the client need? And kind of clarifying that and setting that as the framework, and then letting the different technical do what they needed to do and develop this kind of quite complicated evaluation design, and then not having all the answers, but creating that kind of space where we can kind of work through them together and figure it out together, and kind of bring the different skill sets and brilliant minds that I had in the team at the time. So first of all, running at it, getting exhausted, trying to be across everything, and then taking a step back and really understanding that what your role was. I think that was my first experience, and definitely a huge learning curve, and still always learning, I think, as others have said.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks to all of you. I think it's really inspiring, actually, I think, to hear you share such honest reflections about your experiences, and particularly what you say about that kind of imposter syndrome, kind of what it feels like to be kind of team leader as you're sort of learning your way into that journey, and how you can find those sort of those strategies for being able to sort of step out of the day-to-day detail, to step up, to think about the vision and the strategy for the project, and how you can set that clarity for your team. So thank you all of you for sharing that. And I think, Isabel, what you were touching on sort of in your part around sort of culture as well, I think for me is a really important point about whether you're a project leader, organizational leader, the role of leadership to be setting the right culture, working culture for a team, and with your client as well, a culture that sort of respects kind of the contributions that everyone brings, an approach where you listen to your team but also to your client. You create those spaces of reflection and learning from each other, and learning by doing. And I think the team leader to sort of play that role in, I guess, if you like, sort of setting the culture, modeling the culture, and sort of just feeding the nutrients into the soil at the right times in the project, is for that culture to flourish and for the team to flourish. So no, thank you all for that. I think we're going to move on to the second theme, which is around strategic leadership in practice. So I think we've already sort of heard from our panelists, being able to balance kind of the technical insight, the technical depth, with that strategic oversight, and managing client relationships can be really challenging, particularly as you're sort of coming new to team leadership. And I think, as our panelists have said already, being able to step back from the detail, think strategically, maintain strong client relationships whilst ensuring delivery stays on track is really important, but really challenging as well. So maybe my question, first of all, to Tim, how do you do that? How do you stay connected to the technical detail whilst leading strategically? And any strategies that you've got that you can share with our audience?
Sure, thanks, David. So for me, this is about kind of structures as much as it is about anything that particularly magic. I think when it comes to the team, a lot of it is about establishing really close working relationships with every single member of your team, and complementing that with collaborative spaces where the team can build shared understanding and kind of cross-fertilize, so that you're really kind of creating that team dynamic. It's important that you kind of, as we've already discussed, give the subject matter experts the space to lead in their areas of expertise, but obviously you as a team lead, you're providing the parameters or the boundaries and the framework within which they can do that, and you're giving an oversight to ensure that you've got kind of timely on budget delivery, and also that meets the client's needs, which are often changing as well. So having the right structures in place, so you can have kind of one-to-ones, you can have kind of other kind of spaces, is really important. So on the Fleming Fund, and in fact probably most evaluations that I've worked on, we've done that through one-to-one meetings, regular team meetings, sometimes fortnightly, sometimes monthly, depending upon the kind of the rhythm of the work at that time, and then kind of broader full team workshops, mostly when we're discussing analysis or kind of results of findings. if it's possible to do that face to face, that's absolutely fantastic. Obviously, that it's not always possible with resourcing, but it's super valuable to invest in that kind of face to face, particularly if you haven't worked together, particularly at the start of a project when you're kind of establishing a foundation for the work. So that's on team. When it comes to clients, it's similar kind of thing. You really need to keep a focus on why are they doing the evaluation, what are they trying to achieve, and when do they need the information for what decisions. So there's no point giving perfect information or analysis and it landing on their desk after they've already made the decision. And unfortunately, I'm sure many of us have been in that situation before. So it's about kind of understanding what they need, when, for whom, and then tailoring the approach and the products that you're generating to those needs. So if you can show them that you're really focusing on utility and that you're flexible and you're kind of able and prepared to respond to their changing needs, help them to kind of work through what it is that they do need, because they don't always have real clarity on that. You can build trust that you've got their interests at front and center, which can help if things don't go according to plan, or things are a bit behind, for example, you need some extensions. So, be proactive in communicating with the client so that they know what's coming down the track. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're clearing that with your program director first. And sometimes, so some evaluations we've done are like a monthly update for the client, which follows a standard format. Often we have kind of regular monthly check-ins or something like that. But it's important so that you tell them about solutions, not problems. Do that in a clear and concise way, so that, and you're talking about issues and recommendations and supporting evidence. If you just try and put yourself into the shoes of someone, a client who's incredibly busy, you need to cut to the chase, and make sure that your communication is on point. And if you don't have that institutional perspective, then lean on team members who do. So, don't be scared to run an email past someone and say, look, this is what I've drafted to the client. Do you think it really kind of gets to the heart of the issue quickly enough? Does it have too much detail? Blah, 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 blah. And then I'd also add in, if you just another minute, David, if it's all right. It's not just the client and the team. It's also the kind of the evaluand, the organizational project or team, whoever that's the focus of the evaluation. And you really need to have that strong relationship there so that you can, maintain a good relationship, access relevant information, talk to relevant people. And you can do that in a kind of a spirit of collaboration and transparency, and avoid any, and work around any potential sensitivities. So again, we do that to a mix of formal and informal. On the Fleming Fund, we have like a quarterly meeting with the team that we're working with, the evaluation partner, and that's governed by a memorandum of understanding that sets out working arrangements. The client is invited, and we review like a rolling work plan. But then I also have a monthly update with the team leader on the team, and that's much more informal. We kind of chat around a whole bunch of issues. We can deal with more sensitive issues informally, and you can replicate that across the team. So it doesn't just have to be at the kind of team leader level. I'll stop there, David. I'm happy to come in on more later if that's helpful, but I'm conscious I've talked for a while, so over to you.
Thank you, Tim. It's really helpful to hear you share some of those really sort of practical tips and strategies for how you've been able to build those spaces for collaboration, also trust building with the team and the client. So thank you for that. Maybe going next to Isabel, tell us about any strategies that you have for being able to lead strategically while staying connected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what to add, because I would fully endorse everything that Tim has said, and it very much mirrors ways of working that I use and we've used in our evaluation, and particularly that close contact, not with the team, but also with the client. I guess just perhaps an example of how I guess, how much investment that requires on the team side. So in the Global Challenges Research Fund in GCRF, we had 5 different organisations working in our consortium on the team side. So had to do a lot of kind of bringing people on board. Sometimes the consultants would change, and we had, you know, it was really paid off kind of investing in that, using a US phrase, that onboarding, but making sure that vision and that consistency was kind of being communicated, that they fully understood the assignments. Obviously, they were much further away from the client. So again, kind of interpreting and communicating what the client wanted, and then having those kind of team meetings and bringing people on board and yeah, giving them kind of concrete contributions to make, so that you're building that culture, as you were talking about, David, you know, of collaboration, but everybody kind of having a really key contribution to make. So that was kind of, we had to repeat that constantly. On the client side, I think there's another kind of good example from GCRF about kind of how that client relationship was really key in helping kind of navigate some bumps in the road. So we had an issue where our immediate client, the evaluation manager, was not really understanding, and perhaps we were not communicating clearly enough, quite a complex and innovative module, and we really kind of got stuck. And you know, we were kind of burning through some of that trust that we built up. And then by a kind of mutual agreement, we thought it was better to broaden out the conversation to some of the more senior people. And that really gave us an opportunity to sort of talk with them, you know, what it was they wanted to get from this module, what they really needed, what some of the pressures and drivers were on them. And it helped us to then kind of communicate and adjust and sort of better position that module. And we kind of worked through it and got something that worked for everyone. And that was kind of a really good example of where, although the evaluation manager is your client, but they're actually part of a much, you know, another organization with lots of dynamics and challenges and pressures on them. And kind of just broadening the conversation a little bit more just really helped us all get to a better place where we understood each other, but keeping that sort of eyes on what the objective was and finding, you know, solutions through that. And I think that actually did strengthen the relationship, which sounds a bit of a cliche, but, you know, we built trust in a broader way across that organisation, which helped in a multi-year kind of evaluation setting. Yeah, so I'll probably stop there. That's probably a useful example to share.
Thanks, Isabel. We've just got a couple more minutes on this topic before we move on. I'm just going to just briefly bring in Sasha and Mayssa. Maybe Sasha first, just to sort of share an example.
Sure, I think it's quite a similar example, or it's at least drawing on similar themes to what Isabel and Tim have just talked about. But Tim, I thought your comment about the importance of meeting face to face to build that relationship, I think, is key. And so the contract that I was involved in with the Home Office, we started the contract during COVID, so that was really difficult. And even though we had fortnightly meetings to check in and build that relationship, it is much harder on Teams. And so as soon as we could start having face-to-face meetings, we did it regularly. And I feel like our relationship with the client definitely improved quite significantly as a result of that. But something else that you mentioned, Tim, of the client not necessarily being clear in what they want. And so that putting us in a difficult position of trying to figure out what that is and then also delivering it to a high quality. One of the strategies that we used with the Home Office was to have these 6 monthly challenge sessions where we would give them an opportunity to effectively step out of their jobs for half a day. Not really, because they were still obviously thinking about the same subject matter, but to think a bit more openly about the subject matter that they were working on, whether they were moving in the right direction, maybe they needed to do something differently. And I guess we played that critical friend role of asking probing questions and being the challenge function to what they were doing. And for us as a team, that was really useful to really understand where they were coming from and to think about the challenges in a different way, so that then when it came to specific deliverables, we had a better understanding of what they were trying to achieve, and we could at least try and position it in a much more effective way.
Thanks, Sasha. Maybe just Mayssa, do you want to come in very briefly? I think you've got a good example around how to stay connected to the detail whilst being strategic.
Yeah, I mean, on my contract, on the Mina Mel contract, it's set up in a quite sort of a different way. So I'm the overall team leader, but I also double hat as the strategic advisor to the Yemen ISF team, to the embassy. And I think that's been a really useful way to kind of keep me grounded, close to the technical delivery, to understand the kind of the constraints that HMG team have in their day-to-day jobs, and keep me up to date with the sort of the latest priorities, which you do stay on top of as the team leader as well. But it's, you understand the constraints at an embassy level much more, playing that sort of strategic advisor role, which isn't a TL role. And that's been quite useful because it's allowed me to sort of apply the lessons and look and learn from elsewhere within the Middle East and North Africa, what other teams are doing, and to try to apply that for the Yemen team. It's a really good structure, and I would definitely sort of advocate for continuing to play non-TL roles at the same time, because you learn a lot by doing that. You also learn from other leaders, just by being a consultant, a team member on another piece, not just being the TL. And that's really useful for applying to the TL position. It does, though, in practical terms, though, sometimes, the workload can become a bit overbearing. So we had this one period of time for the Yemen embassy where we had multiple pieces of MEL deliverables happening at the same time on quite different topics. And there I had to kind of step out of that delivery role and just make sure that my role was to sort of ensure that we're fully resourced for those different pieces of work, but most importantly to make sure that every single team member kind of had the background that they needed to, that I was looking across the pieces to make sure that we weren't overly burdening the UK government team with similar questions, sometimes the same questions, sometimes to the same stakeholders. So really kind of looking for efficiencies wherever we could, and balancing that so that in the end the client gets what they need and it's actually tailored to what they need as well, but without kind of necessarily being involved in the detailed delivery of that work. So it doesn't always work, but it is a good way to sort of balance the two.
Thank you, Mayssa. So we're going to move on to our final topic now. Just a reminder that we'll then move to a Q&A session. So please do post your questions in the chat. So there's a Q&A bar that you should see at the top of your Teams window. It might be in the more bit with the 3 dots, but hopefully you can find that. Yeah, please do post your questions, which we will try and cover as many as possible for the last part of the session. So just now moving to the last topic. So this is around leading people through change and transition. So the overseas development assistance landscape has been undergoing significant disruption and change over the last sort of 9 to 12 months. And as leaders, as project leaders, as organization leaders, we're navigating uncertainty, not just within our teams, with our clients, but also across the sector more broadly. And so maybe starting with Isabel, first of all, a couple of questions. What tools have you found helpful to build team cohesion through periods of transition? And what's your take on how the recent sort of shifts in the sector have impacted or impacting your leadership approach?
Yeah, thanks, David. The easiest question. But yeah, I mean, transitions are challenging. There's a lot of uncertainty creates a lot of negative emotions. People having a whole range of concerns, sometimes related to just the day-to-day work and the project, but also broader. So I think less tools and more about kind of being human, which I think we've discussed before. So people want to feel that they've been listened to, and kind of having that trust that as much as possible their concerns are going to be considered in whatever kind of decisions or solutions need to be made. I think teams also appreciate kind of clear communication about what's happening and why, and kind of timeframes and what the parameters are and kind of potential implications, even if you kind of, you won't have full information and you won't know about that. But trying to sort of be as open as possible with people about what's going on and why. In my experience, I feel they're also looking for confidence in the team leader, that they're kind of on the front foot, having kind of anticipated possible options or thinking through solutions or scenarios, but also kind of making that space to try and work through solutions together. So, if you've kind of understood what the parameters are, or maybe we've got a very short time frame that we have to adapt and flex here. But keeping that kind of culture that we've been talking about of kind of collaboration and allowing people to bring and draw on their kind of skill sets. And I think as team leader, you kind of really need to model that culture even more so in these kind of, pressured and transition kind of periods. So, being there to listen, but also, putting the work in to kind of, think things through and come to the team again with kind of solutions and as much positivity as possible. So I guess, again, the kind of lots of examples from the Global Challenges Research Fund, which was a 5-year evaluation that we just got started, and then COVID hit, so we had to completely kind of pivot, and we couldn't really work face to face, so we had to use a lot of those approaches that we talked about earlier, having as many kind of meetings as possible, but trying to make them not online, but as not just task focused, but kind of bringing in allowing a bit of space for emotions and how people were feeling. It was a really challenging time. We also had to restructure the evaluation because of the budget, the cuts that there were in the official development assistance in ODA. There were political sensitivities that we had to navigate because advisors to the government changed. So there was a lot of kind of having to support people through these ups and downs. I guess another thing is, as team leader, I think you have to accept that not everyone is going to be happy with whatever way through you find. But again, trying to help people focus on opportunities or solutions, you can kind of keep a sort of positive atmosphere as much as possible. In terms of the broader sector shifts, there's a huge amount of uncertainty around at the moment, and I think obviously the clear factor is it's a much more constrained resource environment that we're working in. So I'm seeing kind of much more emphasis on evaluations needing to prove their utility and value, but also being able to be really nimble and providing the inputs when they're needed, because our clients are also in a situation of kind of flux and uncertainty as well. And so suddenly there's a kind of a need for an input or a deliverable that's kind of outside perhaps the more larger set pieces. So again, finding those opportunities to demonstrate and prove the usefulness of the evaluation approach, but needing to kind of flex and adapt as everyone's grappling with the shifting context. I think Tim mentioned right at the start about kind of also different actors coming into the space and different organisations bringing kind of different perspectives on development, or and I'm finding that I guess my having to foreground my values as a development specialist and also a male specialist is kind of coming more to the fore. So needing to become more of a champion for that value of that independent perspective. And the value that can bring, but also some of those values of kind of bringing the focus back to affected communities and affected people, especially some of the spaces I work in are quite abstract, kind of policy level. So I think kind of, those values that come from my background as a development person, thinking about equity and inclusion, and building a kind of sense of accountability to that as part of that broader vision. And trying to connect, kind of finding where there are those shared values, even if we're coming from slightly different places. So I think those are some of the sort of key things that are coming through at the moment. But I guess there's a lot of unknowns, and we're having to evolve our approach all the time. And I guess we've touched on skill sets earlier, but I think also coming much more to the fore are those skills of kind of co-production, of working with the client much more closely. It's much less of us bringing things to them, but it's, you know, co-designing, understanding kind of, you know, what's going to work in their setting, and that involves kind of facilitation skills and those kind of relationship skills that we've been talking about, as much as kind of technical skills in research design. So yeah, I think that those were some of the things that are coming up for me at the moment in this uncertain context.
Thank you, Isabel. That's extremely insightful. Thank you for that. Sasha, what's your take on that point around how you see the team leader role evolving and the sort of skills that you feel are even more important for team leaders to have?
So I guess my key reflection at the moment is how much more political the team leader role is becoming. Isabel mentioned this as well, that clients are increasingly wanting evidence so that they can prove that what they're doing is good. I think especially with budget cuts in the UK at the moment, there's a need for evidence to justify spends, to justify budget allocations. And there's definitely a key role that we can play as team leaders of MEL contracts in delivering that evidence. But I think the key thing will be effectively being a broker between evidence and staying true to that evidence, but ensuring that it is speaking to the needs of the client, but not manipulating that evidence so that it does the job that the client wants. That if the evidence comes back and says this is not working or this is not the best angle to take, that we're honest. And I think that can put us in a difficult position, I guess, between our teams and the client when the team wants to be delivering good quality work that is honest and credible, and the client has quite specific political needs almost, and that there's a role for us. Maybe firewall is too strong, because I don't think we need to protect our teams from the politics. They need to be aware of what's going on, but effectively being a broker between the two and communicating that evidence and having those hard conversations with the client if it needs to happen. But then I think there's also an element of managing morale, and so I think that actually goes both ways. That and Isabel, this picks up on something that you said as well, of coming into this sector from more of a development perspective, and particularly in the UK, the shift is increasingly towards national security, and so working with our teams to understand these shifts and align, I guess, what we're delivering with our values and coming into this, but also with the client, because ultimately they're also people that got into this often for very similar reasons, and so trying to do the best job we can in a changing system. And from the comments that we all made at the beginning in response to the first question, I think the most important skill is that ability to step back and not rush into conclusions or a direction of travel, but to kind of see how the pieces are landing and then try and adapt the best we can.
Thank you, Sasha. Just a couple more minutes before we move to the Q&A, just to bring in Tim and Mayssa for their quick reflections. Tim, what's your take on this point around the role of team leader to sort of help teams and clients navigate uncertainty and transition?
I haven't got a huge amount more to add, David. I mean, I think the kind of principle of being flexible and adapting to changing client needs or changing circumstances or whatever is a good practice in any case, isn't it? But I just think the need for that is becoming more acute at the moment. And as Isabel says, that does create kind of discomfort within teams. So, you know, just being able to kind of step back and think about, well, what do I need to give people? They don't necessarily need all of the kind of the detail around this. They just, in some respects, you cut it back to, what do you need me to do? How much resource have I got? What deliverables do I need? And then you're enabling them to kind of manage their competing priorities. So, you know, it's making the judgment around what do I need to share in order to kind of, you know, support that team dynamic still. And the kind of the idea of ambiguity and just being comfortable with ambiguity, you know, it's very, very rare in the jobs that I've worked on over the last few years to have clarity about how this is going to pan out from start to end. Not least because evaluations are often over a longer period, but also because the context is shifting so quickly and so on. So I think just being comfortable with ambiguity is a really important kind of mindset to go into this with as well. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Tim. And Mayssa, a very quick final reflection from you.
Yeah, super quick from me, I think. It's been such a turbulent year for our sector, and I think, you know, what a team leader looks like is really, really sort of changing, both in terms of, you know, some of the resource constraints that Sasha was talking about. You know, certainly in my area, I'm finding there's a much closer shift towards harder security, so a real move kind of away from more traditional development, and that requires, you know, different skill sets. Also, sometimes requires practicality, such as, you know, security clearances, those types of things. So there's definitely a difference in the kind of team leader, if you like, that we have now compared to maybe what we might have in the future, at least for the kind of contracts that I work on and the clients that I work with. And I also think, you know, we can't ignore the kind of the introduction of AI as well. So I think, you know, the use of, you know, AI tools got to be something that as team leaders we need to engage with and feel our way through, if you like. And I really don't think that there's any point in resisting it at this point, you know, in time. So I do think that the shape and the scope of work for team leaders is changing, and it's just been such a turbulent year. You know, the sector as a whole is really shifted, and I think the only way, you know, for me personally, it was sort of around scenario planning, what next year might look like, you know, what might the end of this contract look like, and what might next year look like, doing that within the kind of the leadership team, but also within the wider team. And I think that's really important because it brings in sort of new perspectives that we might not have thought about, but there is something kind of quite comforting about it, about sort of all being in it together and trying to think through, you know, positive ways forward, or alternative routes, if you like. I'll stop there though.
Thanks, Mayssa. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your really, really helpful insights, strategies, and also very practical examples as well, which I think really bring those kind of tips and strategies to life. So thank you for that. We've got just under half an hour to address questions that you've been posting. So thank you to those of you that have been posting questions. Please keep them coming. Got quite a few. We're going to try and get through as many of these as we can. Really great to see, June, your comment there about having this kind of community of practice where you can talk things through that feel personal. I think just a reflection, just how great it will be to continue to find these kinds of spaces to share and reflect together as team leaders, as practitioners, as people wanting to become team leaders. Just these spaces for reflection and grappling these difficult questions, particularly on the evolution of the role, I think is really important. So thank you for sharing that. We've got a question from Caroline Gatimu, specifically for mail contracts. How we handle resistance from organisations implementing partners that you're expected to support, despite this being part of your TORs with the client. Maybe invite Isabel. Do you want to come in and say something on this?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. It's with the experience I had in a contract where, yeah, we were brought into the funder wanted to build kind of MEL capacities in their grantee organisations, who were a little bit surprised because a lot of them felt they already had kind of MEL capacities. So it was, it was a situation where there was certainly some scepticism through to resist. But I think it's approaches we've been talking about here. So really sitting down and trying to kind of, you know, okay, so we're here, let's at least have a conversation about what might be the opportunities that you're seeing in this, and that, you know, where there might be some kind of needs that we could support with, but really about building kind of trust, and particularly in a situation where we'd been brought in by the client, kind of trying to build a kind of a safe space where we could collaborate and understand that organisation and provide kind of quite tailored support without it necessarily being a hotline back to the funder about what or the commissioner about what their weaknesses were. So again, it's the relationship building, the trust, creating that kind of psychological safety, so that people could be kind of a bit honest about perhaps where they could see areas for improvement in their organisation's mail, and then having some very kind of quick, concrete, ways of demonstrating that we could bring and add value. So some quick deliverables, easy wins, that kind of thing. So again, building the relationship not just through talking, but through kind of doing things together and actually demonstrating that they had value. So yeah, that was our experience, and a relatively successful approach.
Thanks, Isabel. Mayssa, did you want to come in with anything in addition to that?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting question. Definitely one that we sort of often come up with. So I think the approach that we've tried to take on Mina Mal, and the approach that I try to take when working on evaluations, is to really try to firstly kind of set up a partnership approach with the client, and to work with the implementing partners. So not to sort of be seen as an auditor, if you like. Yes, we're there to do an evaluation, and we're there to judge the performance and the progress of the work and the extent to which that's met the client's expectations and goals and objectives. But I think we have to be very realistic about the context in which they're operating in, and we also have to be very realistic about what are the actual objectives of the client that's requesting this piece of work. What is it for? What is it going to feed into? What are the priority areas? And I think personally, I learned quite early on from my first evaluation report, which sort of came back with 16 pages of red from the implementing partner, to try to be strategic about the points that you want to get across. There's a bit of give and take, and you have to take things and look at things from the perspective of an implementing partner that might be sometimes working in quite extreme contexts, very difficult contexts, and shifting UK priorities as well, which is also an additional challenge for them. So that you've got to sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together, but actually maintain that kind of strategic focus, if you like, on what is it like to do that as an implementing partner? What is it like to manage that as a UK government client? And I think just trying to engage in a kind of a facilitative and partnership approach, as opposed to being extremely rigid and taking a sort of more of an auditor approach.
Thanks, Mayssa. I'm going to move us on just to try and cover as many of these questions as possible. There's a question from Christine. How do you empower junior teams with relevant skills, also given the entry of AI? Maybe Sasha, can I come to you on this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think the entry of AI is a difficult one, but I think there is still a really important role for junior team members. And to give, I guess, quite a specific example, at the end of last year, we did a piece of work for the Modern Slavery Unit, and it was two-pronged. So one was a research piece of looking at the state of modern slavery in some priority countries, and the other was an evaluation of programming that had been done. And we had two junior consultants on that, one on the research side and one on the evaluation side. And the way we organised it is that we had quite a flat team structure. We had two junior team members, two senior team members, but we were a team that was responsible for delivering this. And so we split onto so one senior and one junior on each the research and evaluation, but the junior team members were very much leading the logistics of organising the field work, of producing the tools, even doing the field work and writing up the report with backstopping and support from the senior team members. And so it was a way of giving them the freedom to lead and learn by doing, but to have this support of more experienced team members in the background that they could lean on and could provide support, but they were very much at the forefront. And so I think that's a really good way to grow, and I think it's something that Itad supports.
Thanks, Sasha. Isabel, did you want to come in and add anything on this one?
I think Sasha set it out really clearly, so I won't add too much apart from just to say that I think we just have to be even more intentional now about making sure that junior evaluators and junior researchers are getting that hands-on learning experience and not kind of being pushed slightly to one side because we can do data processing quickly with AI. I think it's still very much a developing kind of technology in the projects that I've worked with it, and you still need to have people who are very close to the data, who've been involved in kind of collecting that data and building it up and using the tool as a kind of a support. But there is that risk for early career evaluators, and so I think we just need to be even more kind of making sure we're giving those opportunities exactly as Sasha described, so that we're kind of still building skills in the early career consultants that are coming through. I was trying to think if I'm old enough now to that when smartphones came in, it was kind of a whole new technology and things had to change. So it's another technology that can really help, but we kind of still have to keep that the things that build up that cadre of well qualified, well-rounded skill sets in the evaluators coming through.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks both. Going to keep us moving. We've got a question from Ivan Kent. What mechanisms or strategies do you use to help maintain realistic workloads across teams, especially where these might be unequal between different members of the team? Tim, can I come to you on this one?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think for me, this is a risk that you just have to manage, and it kind of happens at different stages, doesn't it? So on one hand, it's about the budgeting and the planning exercise at the start of the process, where you're saying, what do we need from different people, negotiating with each team member to say, do you have that time available, giving a sense about when that time is likely to be needed, not just the total amount of time, but when the kind of the rhythm of the work is likely to happen, so it can be planned, and keeping that conversation live as things change, because they will change. And I think a lot of the time, Ivan, we get to kind of crunch points, don't we, particularly around the time when the deliverables are due. And I think probably the best advice I've ever had around this is just start early, and don't take your data collection to the last minute and then squeeze the analysis and the drafting process. Just, because the reality is that an extra week of data collection isn't really going to change what you're finding substantially, but it will make a substantial difference to how crunched and pressured that last little bit is. And a lot of what you need in your report and your products, you can start to assemble it way in advance of actually kind of the final deadline. So don't leave it until the last minute. And I think that really helps with just kind of being able to manage your workflow and avoid this kind of horrendous, accelerating towards the buffers at the end of the track kind of process. I'll stop there because hopefully that kind of triggers some thoughts from the other panelists.
Thanks, Tim. I might just add to this. I guess a lot of projects that are delivered in Itad are delivered by an external team leader, and the external team leader is accountable for the technical delivery and success of the project. But when it comes to commercial accountability, that has to sit within a consultancy organisation like Itad, and so we have project directors on all of our projects. And I think what I'd add to this question is how vital it is to have a really close working relationship between a team leader, a project director, and a project manager, and making sure there is that sort of that clarity around the budget envelope, for overall, but also for different components, I guess the budgetary pressures and commercial pressures faced within a project. Because as a team leader, it's really important that you don't feel disconnected from the commercial understanding of a project, because technical decisions and commercial decisions have to go hand in hand with each other. You can't make a technical decision that's going to impact the commercial of the project, or vice versa. So I'd say that relationship between the team leader, project director, project manager is absolutely vital for this, and therefore for maintaining oversight of workload and realistic workloads across your team as well. So yeah, just to add that point. But I'm going to keep us moving, if that's okay. We've got a question from Philly Desai. How do you balance meeting the client's, in brackets, changing needs with avoiding continual scope creep or demands which go beyond the scope of the work? Tim, you've thumbs up this one. Would you like to come in again on this one?
Yeah, I don't think there's any particular magic bullet for this, Philly, other than to be clear about what's in your contract and your terms of reference, and to be prepared to hold the line. So sure, you can be flexible, but and again, this goes back to what David was saying about the close relationship between the team leader and the project director and the PM. Ultimately, the team leader is responsible for technical delivery, but Itad in this case is the kind of the contracted service provider, and ultimately it's on Itad to make sure that they're comfortable with what they're committing to. So don't rush into saying yes to the client all the time just because they've said, oh, now I've got that piece of information. What I'd really like is the next piece of information, because of course that's going to happen, but that isn't how it works. And if that is how it works, then there's likely to be an additional resource implication, therefore an additional cost, and that's a conversation between the project director and the client. So yeah, but go into conversations, be flexible, but be clear about what the resource implications are, and don't rush to say yes. Just say, oh, that sounds like a really interesting idea. Let's have a think about that, and we'll come back to you with some options or some thoughts around how we could make that work.
Thank you, Tim. Do any of our other panelists want to come in on this one before we move on?
I'll come in quickly. I think, yeah, it's really important. What we tend to do on our contract is, develop a scope of work that sets out clearly what we're going to do. Then once the contract is signed and we're kicking off that piece of work, we have an inception workshop where we retell the client the scope of the work, almost the terms of reference, and this is what we're going to do. And I think, like Tim said, you do have to be flexible where you can be, but where it's really mission creep and, you're no longer able to produce the same quality within the same resources, you do sometimes have to have an awkward conversation and push back in terms of the scope. And then when we deliver, said evaluation and we hold a presentation, we then remind them what the scope was, and therefore, where are we now with the findings and the conclusions and the lessons and recommendations, just so that they're crystal clear at the end of the process, because quite often it's not the same client, you have shifts in staff, so we're reminding them right at the end as to what the ask was in the first place.
Thanks, Mayssa. Sasha, did you want to come in briefly? I saw a hand.
Yeah, it's very similar to what Mayssa is saying, was of being really clear at the outset. And so I've been working on effectively an inception report for a specific deliverable at the moment, and it reads it's very boring, and it doesn't say anything groundbreaking. But I think it's important to think of like an inception report not as a flashy thing, but it's more an accountability tool of this is what we say we're going to do, so that at the end we can say, well, this is what we did. But yeah, there is still challenges of that changing along the way. But I think relying on the budget to shape what is in scope, because the deliverable I was talking about earlier on modern slavery, there was a a desire to add additional countries of fieldwork after we had already started the process of data collection, and using the budget and to define what was possible was a really useful tool.
Thank you, Sasha. Moving on, there's a question from Amelia Peltz. Sounds like many of you came from technical and or male backgrounds before moving into a more management role. From ITAD's perspective, when you're considering new team leads, how much emphasis do you put on real world management technical expertise versus having a management training certificate, such as a PMP? Do you look for certification in team leads, or is previous work experience sufficient? Thanks for the question, Amelia. I might just sort of start on this one and see if other panelists want to come in. I think it kind of goes back to what I said in my introduction, that the challenge we often face when recruiting team leaders for bids, and a lot of our work we get through public procurement, is that client terms of reference are often very specific and restrictive about the expertise they're looking for in the team leader. It could be 15 years experience in being a team leader for similar evaluations with thematic expertise in X, Y, Z. There's often a very long list of qualifications, which already narrows down your pool of team leaders that fit the kind of bill for what the client is looking for. And then you throw into that the kind of team leaders to be available, often at short notice, and often, I guess, when bids are scored, it's very hard to assess a lot of the softer skills we were talking about at the start that are so valuable in being a team leader. And so for us in ITAD, we obviously need to make sure that when we're putting team leaders forward, they meet the criteria, but it's really important for us that we hire team leaders, that we know and we trust, and we like to build long-term relationships with our team leaders. And as Isabel, Mayssa, Tim and Sasha have all said, they've been working with us for a number of years now on repeat contracts. But also what's really important for us is those softer skills, being able to manage often very difficult clients in a way that's empathetic and supportive and listening, but at the same time being able to sort of steer and influence our clients as well. Team leaders, I think Sasha was talking about the political role of a team leader, being able to understand the organizational politics of our clients and the extent to which evidence is valued, and therefore our role as a team and a team leader in influencing our client to take up and use our evidence. So I think we place a lot of emphasis on those softer skills, the communication skills, the listening skills, the ability to be able to nurture teams and get the best out of teams. That for us, I think, are the most valuable skills that we prioritize over, certification, for instance. And I guess the challenge is, being able to build a pool of team leaders and diversify our team leaders. So it's not always the same team leaders that are going forwards and winning bids, but we've got a much greater diversity of team leaders, particularly with the technical and the soft skills as well. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers the question, Amelia, but maybe I'll invite other panelists to come in with any additions. Anything else to add? Should we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, other than to kind of endorse what you're saying, that it's not. I think it's much more what ITAD looking for, but perhaps more broadly is that kind of combination of technical and soft skills. And so I think if you're wanting to move, there's a couple of questions on how you can move into a team leader role, which perhaps you can pick up from here. But I think my advice would be to, really look at the skill sets that you have already, because I'm sure in most of our experience, you are already using these kind of, softer skills, communication, being collaborative, being able to kind of, facilitate and all these things we've talked about, perhaps just not in a leadership role. So I think it's almost like building your own confidence by looking across your whole skill set. And, volunteering, putting yourself forward, trying to find these opportunities or asking for the opportunities to gain a bit more experience, perhaps in a technical lead type role, which I think would bring, experience that would be a good stepping stone to the team leader role. So I guess I guess it's not about certificates and formal training, but actually understanding, as you've expressed really clearly what you're looking for, and then looking at your own experience and really trying to, build your own confidence that you actually have already some of those things already there, and looking for the opportunities to practice and develop them.
Thanks, Isabel. Thank you. Got time probably for 2 or 3 more questions. So another question from Philly. How can you ensure that you understand the client's wider long-term objectives as a team leader? And how do you gain an understanding of the internal dynamics of the client, organisation, teams, different requirements? I think all of our panelists have something to say on this, but maybe Sasha, can I go to you first?
Sure, yeah, maybe I was smiling too much. I think that's a really good question, but I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it takes time to build up that knowledge and to build up an understanding, and I think it comes from building that trust up with the team. I mentioned earlier that the contract that we delivered with the Home Office, we started it during COVID, so we weren't able to have in-person meetings to start with, but once we did, and then you start having those just chats while you're getting coffee before the meeting or in the tea breaks, and I think that's actually when you start to build up that understanding and more of a personal relationship with the people that you're working with, and it more comes out in I guess side comments of conversations rather than the big conversations of this is what we're trying to achieve as a team. I think even when there's a overarching strategy for what a particular team is trying to achieve, what that means in the detail is not always clear to them, and I see that as part of our role of teasing that out, but yeah, it's not a quick process, and so thankfully a lot of these contracts are for several years, so we've got time to build up that knowledge, but yeah, it does take quite a bit of time.
Thanks, Sasha. Maybe bring in Tim. Did you want to add anything on this?
Yeah, thanks, David. I'd agree with Sasha about the fact that it takes time. And I think there are some mechanisms you can use to kind of ensure that you start off on the right kind of footing. So the Inception report is a really important kind of mechanism, isn't it? And using that as a vehicle to have relevant conversations. I also think that, and this can vary wildly. Getting some kind of, I think Isabel used the word onboarding earlier, but getting a briefing from the organization or the client around what is it that they're looking for, who are the relevant stakeholders, on the project itself, how does it work, what are the different constituent parts, etc. And that might involve, a whole day of just of interactions with different parts of the organization, but trying to kind of prioritize that and get the client to kind of give you the time to really tell you what you need to know is a really, really, really important thing to do. So yeah, I think that's important. If there's ever an opportunity to kind of do joint work together, so I've been on client visit on kind of data collection visits with the client, and that just creates those moments that are outside of a formal delivery discussion where you can talk around the issue and you can kind of help them to understand the evaluation design better, or you can they can get an insight into some of the challenges that you're facing and managing expectations and so on. So yeah, I think they're the kind of examples that I think are useful to consider. I think also Itad has brought clients down to Brighton before just to kind of do a bit of a workshop around, this, if depending, because it varies the extent to which clients are kind of conversant with the language of Mel and the experience of managing these kind of things. So having space to say, look, let's spend some time together. It's kind of being intentional about that, I think. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Tim. Mayssa, do you want to come in with any additions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Tim just said. Really, really useful sort of hints and everything. I think also, if I look back on sort of my younger years, I probably pretended I knew the answer to, or guessed the answer to a lot of questions. And now I'm not embarrassed to just ask the question, what does your team look like? On answers that maybe I should know, but I don't know. So I'm, I think it's also something for just asking the question directly. No question's a stupid question. So, it's just much better to ask the question and get the answer to it from the client when you don't know. But otherwise, you know, face-to-face work, any time that you get face-to-face with the client is really, really helpful, both for them understanding the way in which we work, but also for us understanding their own constraints, but also their personalities, and be able to sort of click with them much better, and know how to sort of frame what you need to say and what you need to deliver when you understand how their own mind works. So yeah, I think real sort of benefit in having some face-to-face time with the client.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of that. And there's a very good follow-on question from Daniel Jalova. How do you handle the issue of delivering adverse findings to a client who expected something else? What is the best timing to deliver such news? During the evaluation or at the very end? I guess my immediate response to that is definitely not at the very end. And I think it speaks to kind of what we panelists have been saying around the role of the team leader to understand the client, to understand, I guess, the different clients within the client and the different, I guess, sort of needs from the work that we're doing, but also where there might be areas of resistance or blockers and barriers. Understanding that from the outset, and I guess building relationships, building trust, like we're saying, the face-to-face engagement with the client, so that if we start to surface some uncomfortable findings, we've got those spaces where we can share those as early as possible with the client, have a chance to work them through, discuss, understand better, not to be landing them as part of the report. I think one thing I've noticed in a lot of our work over the last few years is that all the difficult conversations should already have been had before the report comes. The report should not be a surprise. The report really should be what people are expecting. So any difficult findings, landing those as early as possible. And I guess as a team leader, you know, you've got that, your role is to build those trusting spaces so that you can land adverse findings, as it were, in a way where they're going to be received as constructively as possible. And we can stay true, as you were saying, Sasha, stay true to the evidence. Do any other panelists want to sort of come in quickly and add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can come in there because we've had an experience like that just recently, and we basically, it was kind of, we didn't want to come to the workshop with the report with the sort of lead contractor, the lead implementer, and kind of anybody to feel ambushed. So we actually then had one-to-ones with both the client and the lead implementer, where we were sort of talking through sort of more informally what we'd found and where some of the weaknesses were and areas for improvement, and just approaching that in a kind of I guess an honest way, because we can't sort of hide those findings, but kind of, you know, wanting to get their perspective on it and having it as a more of a dialogue. That really helped, because what we found was that the implementing partner was like, yeah, we've been thinking about those things. It's really great you've picked up on that, and hopefully you can actually, you know, give us some recommendations and ways forward on that. And similarly, the client was like, yeah, great, you've picked up on that. So often, you know, these things, people may be already aware of them, and it kind of having the opportunity to kind of talk them through. Maybe, you know, there were some things that we had not fully understood and there was a bit more background. So that conversation was really helpful to kind of, you know, give a bit more context to those challenging findings. But yeah, it was a little bit awkward to start with, but actually it was hugely valuable to just have that opportunity to talk the findings through informally. So then we had a really productive workshop where everybody had kind of absorbed these things and was willing to kind of look for solutions to them. Yeah, I hope that's a helpful example.
Thanks, Isabel. Thank you. That's a really helpful example. We've got 5 minutes left now. I mean, first of all, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to all of our participants, our panelists. Just really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights, your experiences, your strategies, tips, practical examples. And thank you to everybody for joining and listening. I think just as a sort of by way of a quick summary and a call to action. So I think, you know, some really, I guess the key points coming through for me from the discussion so far around the mindset shifts. I think we heard from quite a few of our panelists around sort of that shift of sort of stepping out of the technical detail and stepping up and owning that strategic vision for the project. I think, Mayssa, you were saying, you know, realizing it's not about being a one-person show. So how do you sort of give space to your team, provide that direction, but give space for your team to flourish and to bring their skills and make their contributions? But I think you also gave examples around needing to sort of stay connected and grounded and like to dive down deep in particular areas, but at the same time holding that strategic vision. And as you will say, it's not easy to do, but it's important to keep that focus on the big picture strategy. I think we talked quite a bit about culture, and Isabel, you talked about culture as well, kind of creating, sort of setting a positive culture for the team and with the client, creating those spaces for collaboration, reflection as a team, but also inviting our clients into those spaces as well, building that trust, that transparency. And I think all of our panelists sort of shared a number of tips around how you can do that. Face-to-face engagement, how you invest in the client relationship, you ensure that what we're doing is staying utility focused. I think Tim, you made that point. Sasha, you shared an example around challenge sessions, inviting clients into those spaces of reflection where we can sort of challenge our clients and sort of be a sounding board to them as they challenging them on their strategy and their vision as well. And I think in terms of transitions, I think you've all spoken about sort of the challenges over the last 9 months in the sector and the impact on the team leader role. But I think we recognise the role of the team leader. Yes, it's evolving and shifting, but I think we're just sort of seeing those important skills coming to the fore even more. So around the soft skills, understanding your client, understanding the politics of an evaluation or a piece of work that we're doing. So being more political, thinking and working politically, and how important that is to the team leader role, being solutions focused. And yeah, sort of, I guess, realising your role as a team leader is to create that space where you want to create those spaces for influence. We're trying to influence our clients to understand, interpret, and then use the evidence that we're generating. So, I mean, look, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to share and to join. Finally, as a bit of a call to action. So, in Itad, we recognise that there's a bit of a gap in the sector around recognise not just about learning skills to become a team leader. I think, as we've heard from our team leaders on the panel, a lot of this, making that transition, making that leap is learning by doing. It's learning from mistakes. It's learning from others around us. It's having those spaces for reflection, reflecting with other team leaders. And I think June made a comment in the chat around just how useful it is to have these spaces of reflection. We're needing to do more of it. And we're considering in Itad developing sort of a learning and development program on becoming a team leader. And so after this webinar, a survey is going to go out tomorrow to everybody that's joined. Please complete this survey. It's very short, but just let us know kind of your thoughts on what you would find helpful. If you're looking to sort of make that leap into becoming a team leader, what would you find helpful in terms of support? And if you'd be interested in a learning and development program around becoming a team leader, be really helpful to get your feedback to sort of then shape our thoughts around how we can take these conversations forward further. But I'm going to stop there and say again a huge thank you to Mayssa, Sasha, Isabel, Tim. Thank you for the time and for being so honest and open and sharing your reflections. And thanks again to everyone for joining. It's been brilliant. And thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks
Bye
all.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.